My constituents, who are poor, most of whom are African American, my constituents were not represented in a private session, in a closed-door meeting, to, in essence, negotiate the rights of my constituents away.
30 years ago, when Diane Ragsdale served on the Dallas City Council, she did not shy away from a fight.
Nothing but racism.
You didn't cut your lights on for Officer Jones.
You do it. You came up here and stood up here with crack on this lady.
You are a racist, my child. And after
This is Ragsdale 30 years later, and she's still a fighter. Today, she runs a nonprofit that builds houses in the low-income neighborhood of Mill City, where families can own a new home.
A bank loan can improve people's living conditions. And so you cannot talk about economic justice without bank loan.
Ragsdale wants to see economic justice after WFAA found 20% of banks in Dallas County don't serve the minority and low-income communities that live below I-30. She says it's time for the United States Department of Justice to investigate what's happening here.
Every element that's involved in this must realize that you will be held accountable.
The Community Reinvestment Act is a civil rights law that encourages banks to meet the credit needs of the entire community where they operate. The law requires banks to draw an assessment area map, the area where a bank does business, and the maps cannot arbitrarily exclude low to moderate income areas. But we found examples like this. A Dallas bank with just one branch provides services all the way up into Denton County and half of Collin County, but covers virtually nothing below I-30, an area that's overwhelmingly Black and Hispanic. And this bank's assessment map shows coverage to all of Ellis County, Erath, Somervell, Hood, Parker, and Tarrant counties, but excludes the lower half of Dallas, again, where most residents are minorities. And finally, we found when bank regulators looked at these maps and others, they did not identify any evidence of discrimination. Ragsdale says bank regulators have failed to hold banks accountable, and that's why the Department of Justice is needed. So when the regulators are failing, what is the role of the Department of Justice?
The Department of Justice has to intervene legally and require measurable outcomes themselves. They have to override the regulators. They have to say, excuse me, you're not doing your job.
And there's precedent for that. In 2016, the Justice Department sued Bancorp South in Memphis. One piece of evidence was the bank's assessment area. At the time, it included 4 whole counties, but like a horseshoe, it excluded nearly every neighborhood in Memphis where the residents are mostly or almost all minorities. The feds said the map was evidence that the bank engaged in unlawful discrimination. Bancorp South reached a $10.6 million settlement with the government, which included $4 million in loan subsidies for minority borrowers and $800,000 to build stronger connections to the minority community. In 2018, the Justice Department sued Klein Bank of Minnesota, and again, a piece of evidence was its horseshoe-shaped map that included the majority white suburbs but excluded the high minority populations of Minneapolis and St. Paul. The bank protested about unprecedented reach by the government, but agreed to a 3-year settlement which included opening a bank branch in a high minority neighborhood and spending $1.8 million on marketing, outreach, and affordable loans to the minority community. Nikitra Bailey leads fair lending policy reform efforts at the nonprofit Center for Responsible Lending in Washington, D.C. Why are maps considered to be important pieces of evidence in these cases?
The maps tell us who the banks are actually extending credit to, and it's really important to look at them and evaluate them to see if they are meeting their fair lending obligations.
Are these homes, is this street a look at what might be if there was more capital?
Well, yes, this is only one small example of what could happen.
An outside investigation. It's what Ragsdale wants. But it's not the only thing. She says community groups have to get well organized and well funded to fight for their equal right to credit.
Redlining is consistent, and our movement against redlining cannot be inconsistent.
In Dallas, I'm David Schechter reporting.